My girlfriend laughed and said, "You'll never be the kind of man women compete over." I smiled, wished her well, and walked away. 10 months later, she watched 3 of her friends ask for photos with me during a charity event downtown. You'll never be the kind of man women compete over. Everyone at that table laughed. Not a polite laugh. Not an uncomfortable laugh. A real one. The kind where people throw their heads back and look at each other like they've just heard the truest thing ever spoken out loud. I smiled. Not because it was funny. Not because I agreed. I smiled because I didn't know what else to do with the shame that was climbing up my chest in that moment. At the time, I thought that was the worst thing she could say to me. 10 months later, 3 of her closest friends were waiting in line to take photos with me at a charity event downtown. Valerie was standing 20 feet away, holding a glass of wine, watching the whole thing. I just didn't know any of that yet. What I did know, in that exact moment, was that I had given that woman 2.5 years of my life. I had driven 40 minutes each way every weekend to see her. I had met her mother. I had held her hand in the hospital waiting room when her grandmother had the surgery that almost didn't go well. I had missed a promotion opportunity at work because I chose to be at her cousin's wedding instead of staying late to finish a proposal my director had asked for. 2.5 years. And she had just let her friends laugh at me like I was a joke she'd been holding back for too long. I didn't yell. I didn't stand up and make a speech. I just sat there for a second, nodded slowly, and made a decision so quietly that nobody at that table even noticed I'd made it. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I was 29. I worked in project coordination at a mid-sized logistics firm in Manhattan. Not glamorous. Not the kind of job you brag about at parties. But I was good at it, and I was quietly building towards something bigger, even if nobody around me could see it yet. I was the kind of guy who kept his apartment clean, read actual books, and showed up on time. I wasn't the loudest person in any room. I wasn't the flashiest dresser or the most confident speaker. I had a dry sense of humor that most people didn't catch until 3 seconds after I'd already moved on. I was loyal to a fault. That was my strength and my weakness, wrapped into one. Loyal to a fault means you stay when you should probably leave. It means you forgive things that deserve a harder look. It means you tell yourself that the person in front of you is the version of them that you fell in love with, even when that version has been gone for months. My best friend since college was a guy named Timothy. He worked in finance, lived in Hoboken, and had the kind of blunt honesty that most people found exhausting, but that I had come to depend on like oxygen. Timothy had told me, maybe 4 months before the dinner table incident, that something was shifting with Valerie. I didn't listen. I told him he was reading too much into things. He shrugged and said what he always said when I dismissed him. "Okay, I'll be here when you're ready." Timothy was always right. I hated that about him. Valerie was 27 when we met. She was a marketing coordinator at a boutique agency in Midtown. She was sharp, funny, and the kind of beautiful that made you do a double take and then feel embarrassed that you'd done it. She had dark hair that she was always doing something different with, and a laugh that could fill a room. When I first met her, she was warm in a way that felt genuine. She remembered details about things you told her. She asked follow-up questions. She made you feel like the most interesting person she'd talked to all week. That was the version of Valerie I fell in love with. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party on the Lower East Side. She was standing near the window talking to someone I barely knew, and she turned at exactly the wrong moment and caught me looking. Instead of looking away, she raised an eyebrow. That eyebrow did something to me. We talked for 3 hours that night. By the end of it, I had her number and a standing invitation to a gallery opening she was helping organize the following weekend. I went to the gallery. The art was confusing and overpriced, and I spent most of the time pretending to understand things I didn't. But she kept finding me in the crowd and giving me these small, private looks like we were sharing a secret no one else knew. I was done after that night. Completely, hopelessly done. For the first year, it was everything a relationship is supposed to be. We had a Saturday morning routine that I still think about sometimes. Farmers market on the Upper West Side, followed by coffee at a place that didn't have Wi-Fi on purpose, followed by a slow walk back to her apartment where we would spend the rest of the day doing absolutely nothing of consequence. We talked about the future the way people do when the future feels exciting rather than terrifying. She wanted to start her own agency someday. I wanted to eventually move into operations leadership, maybe start a consultancy. We talked about traveling. Portugal was at the top of both our lists. We joked that we'd go for our 5-year anniversary. We had inside jokes that would have made zero sense to anyone outside the two of us. She called me the logistics guy whenever I overplanned something, and I called her the pitch deck whenever she tried to sell me on an idea she knew I'd push back on. It was easy. It was the kind of easy that makes you stop bracing for things to go wrong. And then, slowly, so slowly that I didn't see it coming, things started to change. It started small. So small I almost convinced myself I was imagining it. She started making jokes at my expense more often. Not mean jokes, exactly, but the kind that had a little edge to them. Like the time her coworker Jason came up in conversation, and she said, "He's the kind of guy who just walks into a room and you feel it, you know? Like the air shifts." Then she looked at me, and then she laughed and said, "I'm just saying, not everyone has that. It's not a bad thing." I let it go. Or the time we were at a dinner party at her friend Monica's apartment, and someone asked how we met, and Valerie told the story but kept leaving out the part where she'd been the one to give me her number. In her version, it was more ambiguous. Like we'd both sort of drifted toward each other by accident. I noticed. I didn't say anything. There was also a shift in how she talked about her coworkers, her friends, the people at events she attended for work. More name-dropping. More concern about who was at what table, who had been photographed with whom, which account a competing agency had just landed. She started caring about optics in a way she hadn't before. And I started to notice that when she introduced me at events, she'd occasionally leave out what I did, or phrase it vaguely, like she was testing whether the information would land well before committing to it. There was one night, at a rooftop thing her agency threw, where she introduced me to a senior partner at the firm as a friend of mine. Not her boyfriend. A friend. I pulled her aside afterward and asked about it. She said she didn't realize she'd done it. She seemed genuinely confused. I believed her. I don't know why I believed her. Her friend group was something I paid close attention to, because friend groups tell you things about a person that the person themselves never will. Valerie had 4 close friends who showed up consistently in our lives. Monica was the ringleader. Loud, fun, and had an opinion about everything. She was the kind of person who gave advice whether you asked for it or not, and she delivered it with such total confidence that people often just accepted it. Monica had never fully warmed up to me, and I always had the sense that she thought Valerie could do better, though she never said it directly. She didn't have to. It was in the way she talked around me at dinners, like I was furniture that had wandered in. Then there was Cynthia. Cynthia was quieter than the rest of them, thoughtful, a paralegal who asked good questions and actually listened to the answers. Of all of Valerie's friends, she was the one I genuinely liked. She had a boyfriend named Dennis who I'd grab a drink with occasionally when the group got together, and he and I had the kind of easy back and forth that happens between two people who are both slightly outside the main social orbit of the group they've married into. Ashley was the one who laughed too loud and posted everything. Every dinner, every outing, every casual Tuesday afternoon coffee run. Her Instagram was a full-time job. She was the kind of person who would order a meal, take 27 photos of it, and then eat it cold. But she was friendly enough, and she liked Valerie fiercely, which I respected even when I didn't understand her. And then there was Natalie. Natalie was the wild card. She had recently gone through a bad breakup and had entered what her friends affectionately called her elevation era, which seemed to mean that she was done with men who didn't match her perceived social level, and she was not quiet about it. Natalie was the one who laughed the loudest at the dinner table that night. I remembered that. The shift in Valerie accelerated about 18 months into the relationship. Her agency landed a big account, and she started attending more events, more industry things, more networking nights. Which was fine. That's how careers grow. But she started coming home from these things subtly different. More restless. More dissatisfied with the ordinary rhythm of our life. She started comparing. Not cruelly, not all at once, but in that creeping way where you don't realize it's happening until you've absorbed 50 small cuts. Ryan from the Hendricks account just closed his second investment property. Monica's dating someone who's apparently pretty well known in the tech scene. Did you see that Natalie went to Tulum? Some guy she's seeing took her. I would nod. I would say something reasonable. And inside, I would feel the quiet weight of being measured against a standard that kept shifting that I didn't know I was competing in. I brought it up once, around the 20-month mark. I told her it felt like she was keeping score. She told me I was being insecure. She said it gently, which almost made it worse. Like she was delivering a diagnosis rather than starting a fight. I'm not keeping score, she said. I just want more for us. Don't you? I said yes. Because I did. But I was starting to understand that more meant something different to her than it did to me. The arguments started coming more frequently in the final stretch. Not explosive arguments. Valerie didn't do explosive. She did the kind of arguments that were quiet and surgical and left you feeling like you'd lost something without being able to name exactly what. There was a Thursday night, maybe 2 months before the end, when I got home late from a project crunch at work and she was already in a mood. I asked what was wrong. She said nothing. I let it sit. She brought up, for the third time, a colleague of hers named Scott who had apparently just been offered a position at a firm in San Francisco with a significant salary jump. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I said, "Good for Scott." She looked at me. "You're not even curious about what it would take to make a move like that?" "I'm working on things," I said. "You've been working on things for 2 years." That one landed. Not because she said it angrily. Because she said it the way someone says something they've been holding for a long time and finally just got tired of holding. I went quiet. I thought about the proposal I'd been developing on the side. The operational restructuring idea I'd been slowly building into something that could either get me promoted or give me a real case to take somewhere else. I hadn't told her about it. Partly because it wasn't ready. Partly because I had learned, by then, that sharing things with Valerie before they were done meant having to defend them before they were formed. That conversation ended with us both going to sleep without saying anything else. And I lay in the dark for a long time thinking about the fact that I was protecting my own ambitions from my girlfriend. That didn't seem like a good sign. The shocking thing, the thing that shifted the audience in my own head, happened about 3 weeks later. I had gone over to her apartment on a Sunday afternoon, unannounced, which I had enough history with her to know was fine. She had given me a key 8 months in. I let myself in. She wasn't home. That wasn't the thing. The thing was what I saw on her laptop, which was open on the kitchen counter, screen on, because she'd clearly just stepped out quickly for something. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't looking for anything. I just walked by and saw a conversation. It was with Monica, and the part of the screen I could see, without touching anything, without leaning in, just in passing, said this. "He's sweet, but honestly V, you've been carrying this relationship for 1.5 years. You deserve someone who people actually respond to." And underneath that, Valerie's response. "I know. I've been thinking about it a lot lately." I stood there for a moment. Then I walked to the couch and sat down. I didn't close the laptop. I didn't open it further. I just sat with what I'd seen. Valerie came home 12 minutes later with a coffee and a surprised smile when she saw me. "Hey, I didn't know you were coming. I wanted to see you," I said. She kissed me on the cheek and started talking about something she'd heard on a podcast. I listened. I was good at listening by then. I had become very good at receiving information quietly and deciding what to do with it later. The breakup happened on a Saturday in October, which is almost cruel because October in New York is the most beautiful month, and now every October I have to make a choice about whether to let that be true again. We were at dinner, not just the two of us. It was a group dinner, Monica's birthday, at a restaurant in the West Village that had been booked 2 months in advance. There were 7 of us at the table. Me, Valerie, Monica, Cynthia, Dennis, Ashley, and Natalie. The dinner was fine at first. Easy conversation, good food, the kind of table energy where everyone is a little on, a little performing, a little enjoying their own performance. Then someone, I think Ashley, started talking about a guy she'd been seeing who had apparently become something of a minor celebrity in certain online circles. Followers, brand deals, event invitations. That kind of thing. The table got animated. Women talking about what it's like to be with someone that other people recognize, that other people want. Monica said, "There's something about a man who other women look at. It just changes things." Natalie said, "It changes everything. It's not even about jealousy. It's just confirmation." Like, yes, I chose right. Ashley nodded vigorously. Valerie, sitting next to me, was nodding too. And then someone asked her, laughing a little, "Does that ever bother you? Like, do you ever wish you had that?" And Valerie looked at me. The table looked at me. And she laughed. And she said it. "You'll never be the kind of man women compete over." The table laughed. I smiled. I reached for my water glass. I took a sip. And I made the decision I'd been approaching for weeks, but hadn't been willing to make yet. After dinner, we walked outside. The night was cold and clear, the kind of New York night that makes the city look like a movie set. She was talking. I wasn't following the words exactly. I was just walking alongside her, listening to the shape of the conversation, and when she paused, I stopped walking. She stopped too. "What?" she said. "I think we're done," I said. Not angrily. Not theatrically. Just plainly. She looked at me for a moment. Because of what I said at dinner? Because of what you've been saying for a long time, I said. I just didn't want to hear it. You're being sensitive. Maybe. But I'm done. She looked at me differently then. Not with guilt. Not yet. Something closer to surprise. Like she hadn't actually expected me to be the one to end it. You'll never be the kind of man women compete over, she said again. This time quieter, with a different kind of weight behind it. I don't think she meant it as cruelty. I think she meant it as a last attempt at control. Like if she could make me believe it, I'd stay and keep trying to prove her wrong. I smiled. I told her I hoped she found what she was looking for. And I walked away. I walked the 14 blocks to the subway, and I didn't look back once. The silence after a breakup has a specific texture. Not empty. More like the absence of sound in a room where sound used to live. My apartment felt different the first week. Not sad exactly. Strange. Like the furniture had been slightly rearranged when I wasn't looking. I didn't post anything. I didn't send messages. I didn't reach out to mutual friends to process or explain. I just went quiet. Timothy called me 2 days after. He already knew, somehow, the way Timothy always knew things. He didn't say I told you so. He just said, what do you need? I told him I needed to do something with the anger that wasn't anger so much as it was fuel. He understood that. Then let's build something, he said. So that's what I did. In the weeks after the breakup, I finished the proposal I'd been quietly building. It was a restructuring framework for the company's Eastern Logistics Corridor. I had been sitting on it for 4 months, refining it, second-guessing it, protecting it from people who might dismiss it before it was ready. I submitted it to my director, a methodical man named Kevin who communicated mostly in nods and long silences. He took it home over a weekend. On Monday, he called me into his office and told me it was the most thorough, unsolicited analysis he'd seen from someone at my level. He didn't give me the promotion right then. That's not how Kevin worked. But he told me to begin presenting the framework to the operations team, which meant I had the floor, which meant I had a chance. I started running the same week. Not because some self-improvement playlist told me to, because I needed somewhere to put the mornings, and the mornings had gotten very long. I ran badly at first. I was slow, and my knees complained, and I had to stop and walk more times than I wanted to admit. But I kept going. Every morning at 6. Rain, cold, whatever. I kept going. I also joined a leadership forum that Timothy had been trying to get me into for 2 years, a monthly gathering of mid-level professionals across different industries who got together to share what was working and what wasn't. I almost didn't go the first time. I was still in the dull ache of the early post-breakup weeks, and the last thing I wanted was to sit in a room full of strangers and try to seem together. But Timothy dragged me, and something happened in that room. I talked about the logistics project. Really talked about it. Without hedging. Without the apology I used to put before my ideas like a doormat. A woman named Rebecca, who ran a small supply chain consultancy, stopped me midway through and said, "Wait, you built this framework yourself? Has anyone offered you a consulting role?" Nobody had, but somebody was about to. 3 months in, I got the promotion. Kevin called it an operational analyst role upgrade, which was corporate language for, "You were right, and we want to keep you from leaving before someone else figures that out." The salary bump was real. The responsibility shift was real. I started leading cross-departmental meetings. I started presenting to directors. I started speaking with the particular kind of authority that comes not from volume, but from preparation. I was still running every morning. I had gotten faster. I had lost weight I didn't know I was carrying. Not dramatically, but enough that I looked in the mirror differently. I wasn't becoming someone new. I was becoming a sharper version of someone who had always been there, waiting for the moment when there was nobody around to make him feel like he wasn't enough. Rebecca from the Leadership Forum had referred me to a contact of hers, a nonprofit called the Meridian Foundation, that was looking for someone to help restructure their event logistics and donor outreach process. I said yes on instinct. It was volunteer work, technically, or close to it, but it put me in rooms I hadn't been in before. Rooms with people who built things. People who introduced me to other people. And each introduction became a thread in something I was quietly weaving together without quite having a name for it yet. I hadn't thought about Valerie much. That surprised me. I expected to miss her more. I expected the late nights to feel heavier with her absence. But mostly I just felt the clean, uncomfortable freedom of a life that was entirely my own again. There were moments, brief ones, usually late on Sundays when the old farmer's market routine would ghost through me. I'd feel the shape of what it had been. Not the pain of losing it. Just the shape. Those moments passed quickly. I wasn't trying to prove her wrong. That's important to understand. I wasn't running on spite. I was running on the terrifying realization that I had been shrinking for a year and a half, and I hadn't even known it. And now that I had room to breathe, I was inhaling like I'd forgotten how. Cynthia texted me about 4 months after the breakup. Cynthia, of all people. She said she hoped I was doing well, and that for what it's worth, she thought I'd handled things with a lot of class. I thanked her. She said there was something she'd been wanting to tell me for a while, and she wasn't sure she should, but she was going to anyway. She said that Monica had been working on Valerie for a long time. Not maliciously, she thought. But Monica had a type she preferred for her social circle. A certain kind of visible, ambitious, high-status man, and she'd made it clear in various small ways over the months that she thought Valerie was settling. Cynthia said she disagreed. She'd told Valerie multiple times that I was one of the genuinely good ones. But Monica was louder and more consistent, and Valerie had always been more susceptible to Monica's opinion than she let on. I don't know if it helps to know that, Cynthia wrote. It does, I wrote back. Thank you for saying it. And it did help, in the specific way that context helps. Not to remove the sting, but to understand its shape. To know that what I'd experienced wasn't just one woman deciding I wasn't enough. It was one woman being slowly convinced, over a long period of time, by someone who had a very particular idea of what enough looked like. That was different. That was something I could set down. Meanwhile, in the parts of the story I was only hearing secondhand, Valerie had apparently moved on quickly, or tried to. The new person, whose name I never learned and didn't want to, was everything Monica had been holding up as the standard. Visible, socially active, the kind of man who got tagged in things. Ashley posted a photo of the new couple at some event, and Timothy showed it to me, not to be cruel, but because he knew I'd rather see it and be done with it than have it exist as an unknown somewhere at the edge of my mind. I looked at the photo for about 4 seconds. I didn't feel much. I noted, almost clinically, that the man in the photo had the kind of easy confidence that photographs well and doesn't necessarily run any deeper than the image. I didn't say that out loud. I thought it and let it go. The Meridian Foundation's annual gala was in August, 8 months after the breakup. I had been embedded with their team long enough that I wasn't just a logistics volunteer anymore. I had become something closer to an unofficial operations advisor. The executive director, a woman named Samantha, had started looping me into high-level conversations about the organization's growth strategy. She was exactly the kind of leader I wanted to learn from. Clear, decisive, generous with credit, and completely unbothered by ego. When she told me she wanted me to speak at the gala, a 10-minute slot about operational growth in the nonprofit sector, I almost laughed. 8 months ago, I had been at a dinner table being told I was unmemorable. Now I was being asked to take a stage. I wrote the talk. I rehearsed it with Timothy, who told me to slow down and let the pauses do some of the work. I rehearsed it with Rebecca, who told me to start with a story instead of a statistic. I took both notes. The gala itself was at a venue in Midtown, a converted event space that the foundation used every year. About 250 people. Donors, partners, press, volunteers. I got there early to check the room setup, which was still the part of me that couldn't turn off. I stood at the back of the room and watched it fill. And that's when I saw her. Not Valerie. Not yet. Monica. Monica was standing near the bar in a red dress, talking to someone I didn't recognize, and she hadn't seen me yet. I processed this fact the way you process a weather update. Noted. Moving on. Then I saw Natalie. And then Ashley. And then, about 3 minutes later, Valerie. The Meridian Foundation was a cause that several of the women in that social circle supported, or at least attended events for. It made sense. I just hadn't accounted for it. I considered leaving. For approximately 4 seconds, I considered finding Samantha, making an excuse, and getting out. Then I straightened my jacket and went to say hello to the board members I needed to greet before the program started. I gave my talk. It was 10 minutes. It went well. Not because I said anything revolutionary. Because I meant it. Because I wasn't performing. I had spent 8 months in rooms where I was learning to speak without apologizing for the space I took up, and it showed. When I came off the stage, Samantha shook my hand and said the donors were already asking about me. Then the reception started, and things got interesting. I was standing with a small group near the center of the room, talking to a foundation board member named Matthew about a supply chain initiative in the Northeast Corridor, when I noticed movement from the corner of my eye. It was Natalie. She was walking toward me with the particular directional energy of someone who has decided to do something before they can talk themselves out of it. She touched my arm. "Hey," she said. Hey, Natalie. I didn't know you were involved with Meridian. I've been volunteering with them for a few months. She looked at me the way people look at something that has changed more than they expected. That talk was really impressive, she said. Thank you. Then came the part that surprised me. Could I get a photo? My firm does a lot of work with nonprofits, and I want to post about tonight. I said sure. Ashley materialized next to Natalie approximately 30 seconds later, which was the kind of thing Ashley could do because she always knew where everyone was. Oh my God, hi. Your speech was amazing. Can we get a photo? I said yes. And then Cynthia found me, quietly, not in the same rushing way as the others. She hugged me and said, "You look good. Like, genuinely good. Whatever you've been doing, keep doing it." I thanked her, and I noticed, over Cynthia's shoulder, Monica watching the whole thing with an expression that was doing a lot of work to appear neutral. And behind Monica, standing still while the room moved around her, was Valerie. She looked exactly the same. That was the first thing I noticed. I don't know what I expected, maybe something that would tell the story of the past 10 months on her face. But she just looked like Valerie. Dark hair, watchful eyes, holding a glass of white wine with both hands. She was watching the group around me, watching Natalie and Ashley still lingering nearby, watching Cynthia, who was now pulling Dennis over to reintroduce him to me. And then her eyes came to mine. I didn't look away. Neither did she, for a moment. Then she walked over. "Hi," she said. "Hi. I didn't know you'd be here." Neither did I, which wasn't entirely true, until a few months ago. She nodded. She was quiet for a beat, which was unusual for Valerie. "That was a great talk." "Thank you." Another silence. The kind that had 10 months of distance in it. "You seem different," she said. "I feel different." "Good different." "I think so." She looked down at her glass. "I'm sorry," she said. "About how things ended. About what I said." I listened. I didn't fill the silence. "I said something cruel," she continued. "And I said it in public. That wasn't okay." I nodded. "I appreciate that," I said. "Are you?" She started, then stopped. I waited. "Are you happy?" I thought about the question. Not performing thinking. Actually thinking. "Yeah," I said. "I really am." She nodded again. Something moved across her face. Not dramatic collapse. Not tears. Just the quiet recognition of someone who has just understood something too late to do anything with it. I found out later, from Cynthia, who was the only one of that group I maintained anything like a real connection with, that the new relationship, the visible one, the social media one, had ended badly about 5 months in. Turns out the kind of man who photographs well at events is not always the kind of man who stays when things get hard. He had been seeing someone else. Valerie had found out the way people find out about these things. Publicly, which was its own specific cruelty. Monica had apparently rallied around her, which I was glad for. Whatever I thought of Monica's influence on the end of my relationship, she genuinely loved Valerie, and Valerie needed people around her. I didn't feel satisfaction about what had happened to her. I want to be clear about that. I felt something quieter, something closer to understanding. The voice that had told her what to want had been wrong, and the cost of listening to it had been paid not just by me, but by her. That wasn't a win. That was just how it had played out. There's a conversation I've thought about many times since that night. A conversation that happened about 6 months into the relationship, before any of the trouble, when we were still in the easy part. We were sitting in her apartment on a Sunday evening, the city doing its Sunday evening thing outside the window, and she had turned to me out of nowhere and said, "I feel like you're one of those people who takes a long time to become what you're supposed to be." She hadn't meant it cruelly. She'd said it gently, almost fondly. "Is that a good thing?" I'd asked. "I think so," she said. "I just hope I'm patient enough to see it." I had forgotten that conversation entirely until after the gala, and when I remembered it, I felt the particular sadness of someone who found the answer to a question they were asked 2.5 years too late. She had seen it. She had just chosen to leave before she let herself believe it. The month after the gala, Samantha offered me a formal role with the foundation. Not full-time, but a retained advisory position. Paid. With the kind of scope and visibility that would change my professional profile. I said yes. Kevin at the firm took it well, partly because he was a practical man, and partly because I had been careful to present it as complimentary, not competitive. My logistics framework had been fully implemented by then, and the results were already measurable. Kevin appreciated measurable things. I was good. I was more than good. I was becoming the thing I had been reaching toward in the dark for years, and now it had shape and weight and forward momentum. Timothy took me out to celebrate. We went to a place on the east side that was too loud and too expensive, and we stayed until they started stacking chairs. He did not say I told you so. Not once. He raised his glass and said, "You did that." I thought about who I was 10 months ago, sitting at a dinner table, smiling through something that should have broken me, walking 14 blocks to the subway in October air. Yeah, I said. I did. The last time I saw Valerie was about 3 weeks after the gala. By coincidence. The way these things happen in a city that is enormous and also somehow 3 degrees of separation from everyone you've ever known. I was at a coffee shop in Chelsea, early, working through notes for a presentation. She came in while I had my headphones on. She was with someone I didn't recognize, a woman I assumed was a new friend or colleague. She saw me before I saw her. I know this because when I finally looked up, she was already watching me with the careful, composed expression of someone who has prepared for a moment they weren't sure would arrive. I took out one headphone. She said hi. I said hi. We exchanged 30 seconds of the small, civilized exchange that people have when they used to love each other and now exist on the other side of it. She looked good. She seemed lighter somehow. I hoped that was real. She started to say something. Got halfway through a sentence that seemed to be heading somewhere complicated. Then she stopped and smiled. Not sadly. Not with regret or performance. Just a small, honest smile. "Take care of yourself," she said. "You too," I said. She turned and walked to the counter. I put my headphone back in. I looked at my notes. Outside the window, Chelsea moved like it always did, unhurried by anyone's story, carrying everyone forward whether they were ready or not. I was ready. I had been ready for a while. She stopped talking. I kept working.